Namaskar. Welcome to Conversations with Rakesh. I shared a very nice video of George Bernard Shaw. He was the Nobel Prize laureate in 1925, got the Nobel Prize for Literature. And I think in 1930s, there was a ceremony where Albert Einstein was being felicitated. And George Bernard Shaw was one of the attendees. Maybe he was asked to say a few words. And that clip is available on YouTube. So I had shared that clip where George Bernard Shaw cracks two jokes, one on Napoleon, one on Einstein, and everybody's laughing. And the argument I made was that humor is very good. Even if you are in the corporate world, in a business presentation, crack a joke or two. And there was a very nice comment and a question by Ruchika. And the question says, humor is difficult. Do you think one can learn it? So I thought I'll make a full video on it. And to prepare for this video, I did a lot of research. I also went through some good articles, some good TED Talks. And the long and short of all this is that the answer is yes. Humor is a skill, a very, very advanced skill in communication. And just like any other skill, it can be learned. And similar skills are songwriting, joke writing, poetry writing. Even if you look at places, you'll find courses on Japanese poetry like haiku, and you can learn it. And there's a framework, there's a art, there's a science, and then you have a trainer or an expert who teaches you. And then through that process, you can become a person who can write good jokes, you can write good songs, you can write good poetry, you can write haiku. And I'm sure there are many more things. In fact, this is a skill which comes under creativity. Extremely creative people do this. Now, that doesn't mean that it's a God gift. And the first thing I want all of you to know, can you learn it? The answer is yes. Will you become a great joker or a stand-up comedian or a person who can move your audience to splits? We don't know. That part is highly contextual and it depends on a lot of factors. But can you learn it? The answer is yes. Can you ace it? The answer is yes. Can you become better at it? The answer is yes. Do you have to be a person who is extremely gifted? The answer is no. Anybody can learn this skill. And if you want to see a TED Talk on the internet, I'll tell you the name of this person. This person is called Andrew Tarwin, and he has two TED Talks, and you can watch either of them. And he says that he was not a funny person by birth. In fact, he was very serious, maybe awkward, but he says that he learned. He joined improv theater, and there somebody trained him. They all worked together. And from there, he went to a job and then he left his job and he now teaches people how to use jokes in professional lives. And he does this for a living. And the TED Talk is quite brilliant. It has lots of people watching it and there are comments. I also read some scientific articles that humor can be learned. That skill is there just like any other skill. And there is a science behind it. In fact, there is a way to write a joke and crack a joke. And thanks to the last few decades of internet, we now know that stand-up comedians do it for a living. I mean, I'm a big fan of many stand-up comedians of India, worldwide. And one of my own students, Sridhar, is a stand-up comedian by the night. In the day, he works for a top company. And he shared the secrets of joke writers, stand-up comedians, that they sit down and write jokes. And there are open mic events that they practice. So they go there, and I've seen this, they write jokes. The jokes are then practiced. Feedback is given. Then they sharpen those jokes. Jerry Seinfeld and many more people have mastered the art of writing jokes. Many universities have courses on how to become a stand-up comedian for a living, how do you become a songwriter for a living, how do you become a poet for a living, and a lot of students do that. Do they apply it and become poets and songwriters and stand-up comedians? We don't know. Just like how many of us do engineering and MBA and do yoga. I mean, those are personal discussions and personal choices. But the point is, The first question you asked is, can it be learned? The answer is a resounding yes. It's a skill, it's an art, it requires tremendous creativity of the brain. So it is connected to our intelligence. And if you look at great songwriters, poets, comedians, they are very sharp people. And sharpness is not defined just by marks and ranks. This is where the world of audiences come in. And that's what you need to understand, that if you look at jokes and if you look at stand-up comedy videos, which are available all around, in fact, I follow many of the stand-up comedians and I really enjoy them. You should see how the jokes land and the entire audience laughs at the same time. To me, that is the critical point we need to learn, that there is something in your words and the way you say it and structure it and deliver it that produces a result. And if you can get that science right, then this whole process becomes learnable. In fact, you could do simple things and apply it in day-to-day life. Like, for example, let's take the next question. The next question then becomes is, in the corporate world, can we be funny, humorous? Is it appropriate? The answer can then be broken into multiple parts. But before we go there, I want to take the question to a slightly different level, that we know that scientifically humor is good for everyone. It lightens the mood. Audience is much more calmer. You as a speaker become much more comfortable. The environment is much more conducive to change, for persuasion and leadership. Abraham Lincoln used to do it throughout his tenure as a president, which was the toughest time, one of the toughest times in those days. There was a civil war going on. There is a civil unrest going on. There are all kinds of forces which are happening. And he was known to be a great storyteller and a person who would crack stories and jokes. And it is there in that movie Lincoln also. And he would probably think about it, practice about it, and use it to lighten the mood, and got through the country to a different stage because of that art. Even in the corporate world, I have worked with managers and leaders, and one of my favorite managers was a person who would lighten the mood of everyone. And every meeting was tense because there is some sales target, there is a business problem, some customer is upset, there is a pressure from the top, revenue is going down, operations costs are going up. So business is all about problems. But his ability to start the meeting with a very light-hearted scenario that would just bring a smile on everyone would make us work in a different context. So it reduces the guard of your audiences. The question then becomes that we know all this. Why don't we use humor and a little bit of a funny scenario in corporate world? And the answer can then be broken down into two problems. One is, many of us feel that if I use humor, I'll be misjudged and misinterpreted as a person who's not serious. And the corporate world requires us to fit in. And one of the biggest problems of fitting in is that we do what everybody else is doing. So the seriousness of the rooms, the seriousness of the culture of the organization forces us to be a little bit more serious. So we don't want to break and we don't want to stand out. We don't want to be misjudged. So that is one big problem. The second is that, let's say you do crack a joke, and if it doesn't land properly, that is rejection and we don't like it. In fact, many times you land a joke and nobody laughs, and it's a very humiliating experience. And then some friend of yours will come and kind of rub it in, ki boss, tera joke chala nahi, and they laugh about it and you feel bad that something didn't work. So because of these things, we tend to go for the low hanging fruit, ki boss, everybody's doing presentation in a certain way, let's just do it. And the last is, many of us have this thought that you need to be a naturally funny person to crack a joke. And that is wrong. I think that is proven by lots of talks, that people who are not funny can be funny, which connects to the foundations of communication. That many of us are not born orators, but you can learn oratory. Many of us are not born songwriters or poets, but you can learn songwriting and poetry. Same as many of us are not born to be stand-up comics or people who can crack jokes. We can learn the art of joke writing, practice it, and deliver it and make people smile. So now let's come back to the question. Humor is difficult. Will it be useful in the corporate scenario? Absolutely yes. Unless it's a situation which is really a crisis, inappropriate situation where jokes are not required. Leave that aside. But broadly, on a day-to-day level, there is no harm in making people smile at a sentence that you have said. What will happen is that when people smile, the mirror neurons of each other kick in, everybody smiles. And there, their mental emotions and the stress comes down. Your message has a better chance of going inside their minds and bringing a change. So the science is very positive that, hey, use humor to lighten the mood, get work done faster. That is step number one. Step number two, you need not be a funny person by birth. This should not be a multiple intelligences theory. If you're good with words, if you can learn, if you can practice, it's the same science of communication and art of communication. You need to know how to structure words, sentences, and deliver. So your ability to think creatively is very high. And that's where you need to read, write, your ability to bring common incidents into life. That's what stand-up comedians do. They take a very ordinary incident and make it into a great story and then make you laugh. So it requires a lot of curiosity and creativity. And the last is, I think you have to move from your own mindset that, hey, I'm going to be judged as a joker, a funny person. Nobody will take me seriously. That's all our own internal fixed mindsets. I think if you lighten the mood with a comment, if you can make people smile with a joke and do it very rarely, like not every time, maybe once in a while, once a week is a good starting point. I think you're on your way. So how do you then become a person who can bring humor? The first is copy some jokes and use. And I'll tell you my favorite slide, which I use in my classes, and the slide is in front of me. The power of joy or laughter in an emotion. So here's what the joke says. My boss asked me to start the presentation with a joke. I attached the payslip on the first slide. So I took it from the internet. You can do it and you can see how the audience reacts. But that's where your confidence brings up. So please copy jokes and start using. That is number one. Number two, see if you can enjoy the laughter with people and try improv a little bit. You don't have to prepare these things. That is very important. That improv really helps. So you have to then participate in these activities. And the third is, if something doesn't work, if your jokes don't land, it doesn't mean you're a bad person or a bad stand-up comedian. Maybe your joke was not timed. Maybe the words didn't kind of fall in. Maybe the way you delivered didn't come in. So you fine-tune all of that. Now, having said that, there are certain things you should never do. If somebody is speaking, don't interrupt and crack a joke at that time. That's what I've seen happening in the corporate world all the time. We tend to make fun of each other. We tend to crack wise cracks at each other. That is not being funny. That is just being irritating. I think being funny is very different. Making people smile is very different. Making people think about something and then suddenly saying something so that their laughter erupts can be an amazing way to build teams, demonstrate your executive presence, and be known as a leader. So on that note, I encourage all of you to try one or two sentences, see if it works, and build on that and start to make people smile. Because if you make people smile, make them laugh once in a while, your executive presence goes up, your confidence goes up, your audience begins to listen to you, and you will get your work done faster. On that note, stay safe.